Cyclone Fina near the Australian top end, likely to develop further. Well, we're off in the Australian region for tropical cyclone activity this season, and it's Tropical Cyclone Fina, which is located just off the northern extremities of central Australia at 9.7 degrees south, 131.7 degrees east. The storm currently has winds estimated at 50 miles per hour, a pressure estimate of 992 millibars, and it's moving nearly due east, just a slight bit north of that, at 7 miles per hour or 11 kilometers per hour. This is the latest as of 10 a.m. Australian Central Standard Time, 8:30 a.m. in Perth, 12:30 a.m. UTC, this November 19th. Well, the storm is currently located here, depicted on the map, with a fairly small wind field extending out only 70 nautical miles, which is around about 110 kilometers from the center of the storm, a little bit further towards the northern side than the southern side. The distance from land right now, 170 kilometers from Croker Island, 171 from Melville Island, 317 from Darwin, which we'll be watching out for, 352 from Jabiru, and 1217 from Derby. All of these locations could be affected by tropical storm force winds in the next few days, as well as heavy rainfall, which could lead to flash flooding and maybe even more prolonged flooding, but I would expect that flash flooding will be the primary issue. There are no warnings currently in effect right now, as the Bureau of Meteorology reckon that there won't be any storm conditions in the next 48 hours on land. The storm is likely to strengthen a little bit, but it is small and likely to weaken near landfall. Therefore, we're considering flash flooding as the primary risk from this storm, particularly along coastal areas of the top end, the Tiwi Islands and Darwin. Rainfall totals of over 250 millimeters is possible in these regions. Let's take a look at the track forecast then in the next few days. It's a fairly unorthodox one because it stops and then it turns towards the south and then slides off towards the southwest eventually I should say, over the weekend. Could pass very close to Darwin, and then the storm really not sure of itself where to go. There is a little bit of uncertainty around this, but in general model guidance is fairly good regarding a general idea of that track there. A bit of a hook round back towards the southwest and then along the coast of eventually Western Australia. Currently 50 mile per hour winds. Bureau of Meteorology are maybe just a few miles per hour higher with their estimate, and ADT estimates, satellite imagery, currently going at 65 miles per hour already. There is a possibility this storm may be stronger than what we're currently giving it, but we are in line with the JTWC's last update. There's the Bureau of Meteorology forecast cone. It's a Category 1 on the Australian scale, and they're expecting a peak, at least in the next 3 days, of a Category 2, and then landfall near Category 2 status on the Australian scale along that northern tip there, and then possibly heading for Darwin after that. There's the JTWC forecast cone, which is positioned a little bit further eastwards actually, and calling for a hurricane equivalent peak there, 75 miles per hour in the short term, and then weakening. GFS also hinting at that on that model run there. Then it stalls, then it turns towards the southwest, and yes, passing very close to Darwin just to the north over Melville Island, and then continuing westwards and then southwestwards, maybe a little bit of re-strengthening, and then eventually might actually turn a little bit further out to sea towards the end of that 7-day period. A little bit more uncertainty as we get towards that period of time. Of course, land interaction is going to adversely affect this storm as well, so the more land interaction it does have, then it may weaken a little bit further than what we would currently expect. Looking at the rainfall profile though, you can see there it's mainly along that western side, and we're already seeing that a little bit on satellite imagery with wind shear strong on this eastern side. Most of the rainfall being displaced to the west, and then eventually when it reaches Darwin, it will then turn towards the south side of the storm. That will also apply to its wind field later on in the forecast period as well. So westwards at first will be the worst part of the storm for rainfall, and then it will shift southwards over the top end and then continuing on towards the southwest. although it does lose its way towards the end of that 7-day period, possibly dissipating, though other models may disagree. This is just a GFS that we're looking at. Rainfall expectations then in that 7-day period, you see a primary area where the storm's currently going to be stalling, and then that secondary area when the storm has a little bit of a second wind as it heads down towards the Derby area. Well, eventually, don't quite actually get there, but looking at rainfall expectations there, offshore getting up towards 1,000 millimeters, onshore though much less. The northern tip of Melville Island may be getting to 300 millimeters, and around 150 millimeters for the Darwin area. Sea surface temperatures remain very warm right now, 28 degrees at a minimum, and probably quite a bit higher than that. So I would say 30 to 31 degrees Celsius for pretty much the whole 5-day period of this storm, which will certainly give it enticing conditions for intensification. The big question really is whether wind shear is going to get the better of it, and maybe dry air lingering towards the south as well over the Australian region. So here's satellite imagery, how the storm is presenting itself this morning, looking fairly good, it has to be said here, and as you can see, it is perched just off the top end of Australia, a relatively small storm. For those that realise the geography of this area, you will know that this storm is actually quite small. Here's some infrared imagery, much more recent imagery there, showing that the eastern side really dropping off a cliff edge there with that convection, a sign of heavy wind shear in that area, and maybe a dry air slot as well, hard to tell at the moment, but certainly underneath all of that, some significant, really high convective cloud tops, so possibility that the storm in its tight core near the centre may be just a little bit stronger than what we're currently giving it. Really good to see on the visible imagery as well here on Himawari 9 this morning. Just those cloud tops really blowing up, a few hot towers, but once again surrounded on the eastern side, probably poorly stacked, although we're not really sure, and maybe wind shear taking a bit of a hit on the storm. Certainly those last few frames on the Forster team website imagery maybe just losing it a little bit. But nonetheless, I think this storm will strengthen a little bit further. It should reach hurricane equivalent status, which would be high-end Category 2 Australian scale, maybe even get to Category 3 before turning southwards, maybe weakening a bit before that landfall, and then passing close to Darwin, maybe as a Category 2 on the Australian scale, or at least a Category 1. Radar of the whole of Australia there, and let's zoom in to the northern regions, and you can see some influence from Fina there, affecting the most northerly extremities of land. Darwin there not really getting very much, and the neighbouring towns not much there either. It's just some very remote areas along that coast that are receiving significant rainfall at this time. Certainly that's what radar is indicating, and satellite is quite similar as well, showing that convection are not getting very far inland at all, and that will remain the case when we look at that rainfall profile over the next few days. It is mostly the coastal areas, exposed coastal areas, that we're most worried about for potential flash flooding, and of course it goes without saying the strongest winds. We do expect that maybe some regions might receive 80 kilometers per hour sustained winds when the storm arrives later on at the end of this week. Looking around the world then, Fina is the only tropical cyclone active, but we do have two areas of interest. Thankfully they're not in the Atlantic. Look at it, it's very quiet there. But the areas of interest that we do have, one in the Bay of Bengal at a 30% chance now, and the Western Pacific, maybe another new system popping up for the Philippines, 20%. Let's hope not, because it's been a pretty bad year there so far. More updates on Fina to follow.